We're going to finish out the Kybalion. We're going to start on this page. This is a long segment, so there's a couple pages that I think we'll breeze past a little later. Just so we're not spending 10 years talking about it. But I think that these final chapters do a really interesting job of getting into the meat of what I think this book is about for the most part. Um, Sorry, my brain is a little foggy today.
No worries.
So we're talking about polarity in this one, which all these concepts it gets into, for the most part, are really familiar to me, and either
Hmm.
it feels similar enough to things in Buddhism, or in a social way. I can see how either the ideas are the same, or they may have affected the way people talk in society, so that I'm aware of it. But especially here with the polarity one, I think that, if you guys might agree or not, is really just duality.
Yeah, really feels that way.
And so everything is and isn't. Spirit and matter are two poles, but it does like branch off and away from duality a bit later on in the chapter, where it starts to be, oh, I can't remember where. It's a little later, but it starts to talk about how like you can't transmute hate into no, not hate.
Love.
Well, you can
Yeah.
transmute hate into love, but you can't transmute like anger into love. And I was like, that's weird, because they're not on the same pole. So it gets a little
Mm.
more minute. But at first, the thought process feels very dualistic, right? Of noise and quiet. There's not, and it talks about how there's no absolutes of good and bad, but we have these words, so they're on the different ends of the poles. So there's degrees of heat or cold, and we call, no matter what we call them, they're kind of just equally the same, right?
It's a bit relativistic in that regard. It's that there are no absolutes, but rather, yeah, relative degrees on these
Yeah, just on
various
these
acts.
scales
These.
of. Mm-hmm. And
Hi,
so,
gang.
oh yeah, so there are degrees of love and hate. There is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear come under the same rule. So, but what is being claimed in this chapter is that only certain emotions or things exist on a pole together. So, like, you can transmute your mental states from one to the other if they're on that pole, but fear cannot be transformed into love, is the claim. Nor can
Oh,
courage be transmuted into hate, because they're not on the same pole.
yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. I reflected on it momentarily, and I think that that's something I disagree with this hermeticism. Is I think that when I thought about it, that my feeling was that any emotion could become another emotion.
I think this. I didn't actually read this passage.
Mm.
Like, I didn't read this section at all, but I showed up to book club anyway. But it sounds like it's very much like an argument in semantics. Like, oh, because if we think about this word in a very particular way, which is restrictive, and there's another word which is its opposite, which is also very restrictive, I think that the way that they're discussing a term such as fear might be too restrictive to be in the same application of some of the Buddhist texts that we've been discussing.
I think
Like,
that's
I
really
don't,
valid. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know that they're actually talking about the exact same things. This feels a lot more like they're talking in a very, um, like the common parlance kind of thing. You know, like when regular people are saying these words, the thing that they're signifying, which is more limited, and it's not as philosophical, right? It doesn't really explore like everything that goes into it. It's kind of an oversimplified thing way to think about, I guess. Because in reality, these things kind of all influence each other, right? So we're saying, oh, well, of course you can transform this
Mhm.
thing into this thing, but it's not. I mean, even that case isn't really what's happening, is it? It's just like you're shifting perspectives,
Mhm.
and these are different feelings and experiences, but in the way that it's talked about here kind of seems like they just mean it in a very direct, like, oh, we're just treating that as a completely separate thing, and at this point in the middle between the two things where they're indistinguishable from each other is just like, yeah, either you have both of them or you have neither of them. In that case you kind of are neutral or indifferent.
Well, when I really
And
focus in on the fact that we're trying to like in this case, we're not necessarily going, "Hey, we're studying Buddha." Right, we're not doing that.
mm-hmm.
When I remember and focus on the fact that I'm trying to look at this as it is notable that the Hermeticism thought process presented to us in the Kybalion here is that this is all a science to them. This is all a
Mm-hmm.
practice of science and transmuting and change and how can we transform certain things. And so, at least in this chapter, and I think the next one, transmutation is mentioned multiple times of this, like, how can we take something that is one thing and turn it into another thing?
Yes.
Power does that give us, and how does it relate to the all, as they put it?
Yeah, I mean that part, it I think it makes maybe a little bit more sense why they would claim this if you look at them in a very restrictive light of like what that experience of that thing is, and then it kind of makes more sense. I mean, I don't think it's accurate either, but I think it makes more sense if we treat them as like a more limited definition of each of those words rather
Yeah.
than like a full human experience of what those things actually are supposed to be pointing toward. So, I don't know. Interesting. It kind of, like, as a theory, kind of sounds like something that might make sense, but
Well, I just highlighted here. They literally refer to themselves as a mental scientist.
How long ago was this written?
Early 1900s.
Okay.
Because this is a response. So, this is actually what's considered a neo Hermetic text. While Hermeticism itself is older and like this being smushy, like combo of thought and Egyptian stuff, which is still vaguely confusing to me a little bit, only because I'm real busy and I do not always have time to research this as thoroughly as I'd like. But this particular text that we're reading was published in 1908. And it's kind of a response to all of the previous Hermetic teachings.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. It quotes a lot of those Hermetic teachings and it expounds on these ideas. It introduces a few new ideas, as I've learned, and then, but also just reiterates the overall teachings as a sort of like reselling by a set of three dudes who effectively are like the New Age prophet of this belief system. They call themselves the initiates. To
Mm.
mm-hmm. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with the principle of polarity for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many difficult subjects. I The next one is rhythm, which I had multiple thoughts on, but overall rhythm t- kind of just makes the most sense as far as like it feels more like an observation of the world in a lot of ways. of like, life worked this way a lot of the times. Although it does seem to go to a logical extreme, and then it reminds me of how um, in the common uh, chatter of society, people will often refer to the fact like things always swing back to the other side, right? Like this idea of like we're gonna especially in politic discussion, I hear people talk about how oh it's this way right now, but it's gonna go back to the other way, and I there is some thought I think that at least here in the U.S. became a way people started talking not long after or around the same time this book was written. Anyway, but that's a speculation on my part based on very little research. So grain of salt with that part.
That's the best kind of speculation.
So it's rhythm and embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, a to and from movement, a flow and inflow, a swing forward and backward, a pendulum like movement, right? And so in this, I got it. Like I got this chapter better than the previous one a little bit more because it feels very organic as far as just a response to like, yep, that's life. There's always an action and reaction, an advance and retreat, an outpouring and indrawing. As I highlighted that because that was fun.
Yeah,
And
he's also referencing Hinduism,
yeah, yeah.
like the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahm.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they may be confusing Brahma and Brahman.
Mm.
Because, Brahma is the creator god, but that
Mm-hmm.
is not the same as Brahman, the world soul. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, interesting connection either way.
And then this pendulum ties in to what they were talking about before of like this connection of swinging across those poles from the polarity poles from the previous section. The tides of life flow in and out according to law.
Good.
Very intense. They discovered this was invariable, and evidence of mental phenomena still there were two planes of its manifestation. There was lower and higher consciousness as they start to get into this very psychological discussion of consciousness, and then they come up with a new law of neutralization. Its operations consist in the raising of the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity, stuff like that. The law of neutralization does a lot of things. Dun, 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 dun. It seems to be that using the will you get from all of this, your goal ends up being to attain a degree of poise and mental firmness.
Uh-huh.
So I think you want to not be swinging around a whole bunch.
I like that we have to guess.
This is my theory. Um, they claim that a lot of periods of enthusiasm will often be followed by depression, which
So
I hope
so don't give too much of a shit.
don't give too much shit. Exactly,
Yeah.
because you're gonna get
Otherwise you'll get
depressed
depressed
later.
about it. Right.
Yeah, you
If you
get too
enjoy things
excited, you
too
get sad
hard,
later. Yeah.
it saps up all your happy juice, right?
But yes, Buddhism says joy has the seed of suffering in itself.
It's not wrong, but the way it's worded makes it feel like I'm happy. Oh, now I'm sad.
Yeah, yeah. I get what you're
Happy.
saying.
Like
There's a rollover error, and now it's 0.
no, it's here. Oh, I was too
Yeah.
happy. Now I'm sad. The seasons balance each other in the same way. So it does get into something that does make sense to me as far as this balance, this pendulum, right? We have our ebbs and flows of like birth, rebirth, death, like birth and death and rebirth. So all of this like makes sense when it's worded in those ways, but just sometimes the mental image this wording gives me is not what I think they meant. Why did I
Well, that's
highlight
how the old-timey writings go.
that? The old timers and how they used to write.
You know, the olds.
The olds.
Once.
Before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far proportionately toward the other pole of feeling. So, this was an interesting thought I had because it connected to some thoughts I've had in the past. Is that can we know joy without suffering, right? And so we've had that discussion before, I think, while looking at another text. This idea of needing it to counterpoint the other thing, because if you've only ever known joy, it's not flavored
It lacks
correctly.
context.
Yeah, it lacks
Yeah.
context.
That makes sense, yeah.
And so I thought that was on point. At least I once again, the wording makes me feel like it wants me to go out and like go experience the worst thing I can on purpose. And I don't know how to feel about that. But I do think where it talks about as a like you guys said, a context. Um that makes sense.
Well, yeah, because, whether you want to have it be joy and sorrow or uh, pleasure and pain or whatever,
Mhm.
they, because it's dualistically entwined, they define each other. So you need both to have either.
Mhm.
And these guys seem to be looking at this duality in a different light. They still recognize that they're related, but they're like approaching it from a different angle.
Yes.
That's my insight. So
Anyone else
there.
have insights?
No. Uh,
Here's a thought process I think that connects well to things I've studied in the past as far as they claim the master or advanced student is able to a great degree to escape the swing towards pain by the processes of neutralization before mentioned. By rising on the higher plane of the ego, much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. As far as I can tell, this is very Buddhist in that particular exact paragraph. um, but worded completely differently. And it was a fascinating realization for me how many thoughts can take us to a similar place, but have such a different flavor to them.
hmm. Hmm.
Because that
Yeah.
feels entirely different than other stuff, but it's saying like the same thing.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was an interesting thing. And so if you are reading the Kybalion because you'd like to be a Hermeticist, I would say that the goal is still to escape the over riding the pendulum too hard. you got you don't want to ride it too hard. You're looking for that sweet balance.
Yeah, that point in the middle of the axis where there's neither love nor hate.
Yeah, striving for
Oh, with a
balance and counterbalance. Yep. Causation. This is the next section. Yep. All right, so causation is cause and effect. Pretty straightforward on that one, I think. If you don't know what cause and effect is, go back to middle school because you should have learned it in science.
Spicy.
I know. This idea of law and order, I think it's very similar to the polarity a little bit, except it's something more actionable, right? Is that there's these, I guess, the goings and doings. So we can imagine nothing outside of, oh no, that's a different thought. That's a different thought. Very actionable, but still to me leaning heavily on that polarity from a couple sections ago. Here we have mention of the all again. The all comes up a lot. The all is, I think, Ottman.
yeah, Atman, Brahman.
Brahmin?
Yeah.
Atman is Brahmin. I tricked you.
Aha. Okay. Then they talk about dice and throwing it. You'll end up getting closer to the numbers again, which was interesting. And I think mostly my brain got really twisty thinking about this. Once again, I've had a very busy life recently because of the end of the school year. So, desk brain no working so good. Additionally, I have been spray painting chairs all morning.
Nice.
And I think
So
I should
you
have worn a mask because I
have
am very fuzzy headed right now.
you huffed some of those aerosols, right?
I was outside and I thought foolishly, this will be enough fresh air. No, no, it was not.
It
I
do
should
be like that.
fool. I was a fool, and I am now suffering the consequences of my own actions. I also struggle to maintain focus after a few sections, right? So this pretty much marks the part of the section that we've sectioned off for today, where I stopped being able to focus as well as I would like to when reading a text um, to discuss because I just didn't care.
Yeah.
um, I
Hold on before you scroll
okay.
down further. There on the bottom of page 175, there
Mhm.
was a point that I found very interesting, which again pointing very much to Buddhism, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, no thing ever causes or creates another thing. Cause
Mm.
and effect deals merely with events. An event is that which comes, arrives, or happens as a result or consequent of some preceding event. No
Ooh.
event creates another event, but it's usually a preceding link in the great orderly chain of events flowing from the creative energy of the all.
Mm.
So, to me, in addition to something that was mentioned somewhere nearby, basically that this is interdependence to me, and it also kind of points to no self because everything is just events and no
Mm.
discrete things.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I'm not sure if that. Uh, oh no, that's in a couple pages, and that's on page 177 where it says when you go back in um, the generations of your ancestors, once you go a couple generations back, your ancestors number in the millions, and all
Mm.
these events of them coming together and so on and so forth eventually led to you being here. And yeah, and just like you have millions of ancestors, every event has millions of events that preceded it and eventually led to this event happening.
Mhm.
And yeah, which then closes the circle to interdependence, in my opinion.
Nice. I like that connection. Good job. Let me congratulate you for being better than me. Good job.
Wow.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
No, that was a really great connection. Thank you for sharing that, Ben. I like that. I got into an interesting thought here where it's starting to capitalize the word free. The teachings are that a man may be both free and yet bound by necessity.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the old. That's something I also like because it's of course the when you're saying everything is interconnected, then how does free will fit in? But which I found very interesting that they said we are neither fully free nor are we neither determined.
Mhm.
As they said, yeah, principle of polarity shows that both are but half truth, the opposing poles of truth. I'm not sure how I really can integrate that, but yeah, that's an interesting thought that they say that there is neither full complete determinism nor complete free will. And yeah, I'm not sure what to make of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then on page 180, which I also found very remarkable, towards the bottom is the master can change these pleases and wants into others, the opposite of the mental pole. He is able to, quote, will to will. So I interpret that yeah, that the master can change his wants and
Mhm.
moods.
I think that
Uh,
ties back into their a lot of their discussion on mental transmutation and
yeah, yeah,
like going from the poles, right? So it's tying back into that again of all right, well I'm going to take this desire and make it into I don't know, I guess disgust. Like, um
which I
and
find,
transform
yeah,
my emotions to control my desires and my wants,
mm,
which give me some of that, I'll be honest. If I could do that and like eliminate my desire for bread, I'll be so fit.
yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
You're
So get rid
also
of
wanting to eliminate your desire for bread?
not necessarily bread, but sugar
Yeah, fair,
and
close
sweets and
enough.
stuff.
Yeah, like okay, all right. I hear you out, hermetic scientist man. How I not want sugar bread. Let's go.
Yeah.
Honestly, lead with this. This is how you're going to get more people in. I would say it really just goes over that again, and but in different ways. The
Mm,
next couple
yeah.
pages, it's not. If you like interesting wordage and story and you know, metaphors, you're good. But there we are. And then we get into gender, masculine and feminine principles, but that they're ever present and in all phases of phenomenon on each and every plane of life. You got,
Wow.
but they're not like a bad thing. It's just to me they just want to give more semantics to things. I'm like, we almost don't need this.
The more
Um,
semantics there are, the more scientific it is. Didn't you know?
yeah, but they're like masculine is positive and feminine is negative.
Yeah,
Not that this
yeah,
particular book is
fancy
claiming
that.
that, but just it's kind of just stating the traditional viewpoint.
No, the book is saying that, but it also says that positive and negative are not to be read in
Yeah,
terms of good and bad.
yeah, it's
So
saying that
that's
positive is something real and strong, whereas negative is like unreality or weakness.
yeah, and then but in the next sentence it says nothing is further from the truth, or nothing is further
Oh.
from the real facts of molecular
Mhm.
phenomena. The so-called, and then they going on to say the so-called negative pole of the battery is the one that basically sets the whole thing in motion and stuff.
Yeah. I think the
And there's
battery is
nothing,
the best way of seeing it, right? Because things go in, they go out, right? It's not that one end is better than the other, but you need both for a battery to work.
and so then they go on and say instead of positive and negative, using feminine, masculine are better
Mhm.
terms. Even though I personally struggle a little bit with applying these terms to things that aren't biological.
Mhm.
That's a bit strange selection of terms here, but you know, I don't know. They seem to
Oh no.
like that for some reason. Yeah,
Mhm. Then it gets into some half science, half pseudoscience.
Corpuscles.
Yes.
aren't that basically like particles? At least that's what I how I interpreted it.
I appreciate that they're trying to like give a generalized thing of here's all of the stuff we know, including science. Bless you, Des.
It's hard to do with a mouse. There you go.
Thanks. Thanks. Just what I wanted.
uh, it just expounds on that for a while. Yep. And then mental gender. Um,
Mender. Ha.
Mender, if you. I also zoned out. I
Wow.
don't have a lot to say about this section.
Uh, yeah, we
um,
can
Um,
let's
Except it's
skip
another
it.
dual mind duality segment. It
I
even says
feel
the
like
duality of mind here.
it seems to me they are pointing towards kind of, or it seems to me they're going on the difference between self and ego, and they
Mm-hmm.
call it the I and the me. The I being the quote unquote self, and the me being the ego, and that a lot of people are identified with the me and unaware of the I, and so on and so forth. I feel like yeah, I've marked the most of the stuff on page 197. So yeah, the old yeah, it's self and ego basically, as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And if you have never thought about these things, very interesting. I and me. I. Oh, I highlighted something. Oh, yes. He is able. So, once again, a master, right? Somebody who can do scientific transmutation of the mind. He is able to rest in its consciousness at will. He finds there not a consciousness of an ability to generate and actively create in the sense of the gradual process attendant upon mental operations, but rather a sense and consciousness of an ability to project an energy from the I to the me a process of willing that the mental creation begin and proceed. So, like, mostly from these last sections of the Kybalion, it really emphasizes a complete, I think, an absolute control of the mental world and so, like your conscious and subconscious. It's a very internal text, like a very internally focused text.
Yeah.
Hello, my son. You want kisses? Yeah, say hi. Hmm. You want to give them kisses? Say mwah. All right, my son is going to the park now. Thank you for this brief commercial break. Sorry about that, guys.
Quite all right.
No problem.
Oh, and here's that quote again. Above, so below, so above. And so that really starts to tie in here where we're thinking about that I, the self, the me, right? The subconscious, the unconscious. Um, Although I think that this phrase, if I recall from the earlier section, is a little more spiritual than all of that, but they're using it again here in a way that makes sense to me. Do 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 do. Thoughts. The student of psychic phenomena is aware of the wonderful phenomena classified under the lead head of telepathy, thought transference, mental influence, suggestion, hypnotism. Many have sought it. It is blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. They talk about it being masculine or feminine, vibration energy. Um,
Yeah, how you can basically implant thoughts into other people.
Here's probably the most mystical hoobly doo of the entire book is where, like, yes, implanting thoughts in other people.
Mystical hoobly doo. That's the best kind.
You know what I mean, right? Where we get to the pyramid scheme of it, you know, like
Mm.
if you follow these ways, you'll begin to transplant thoughts in others. It's very 49 laws of power going on here. Nah, 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 nah. Strong people manage to implant their seed thoughts in the thoughts of the masses of people. This is why the masses of people are such sheep-like creatures, never originating an idea of their own. Blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Nah, nah, nah. Double checking. Nothing here I want to talk about. Nah, nah, nah. More vibrational energy. Nah, nah, nah. Last night I had a nightmare about a tornado. That was very exciting.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. The purpose of this work is not to give an extended account of psychic phenomena, but rather to give the student a master key where he may unlock the many doors leading into the parts of the temple of knowledge which he may wish to explore.
Yeah.
And there
Um,
are very or next to no actual exercises in this book on how to do this. They always say, "Oh, if you're a master, you can do this," but
yeah, they
they
never
I
sit you down
feel,
and go, "All right, here's how you do this."
yeah,
And then this is the final section. Yes, final section. Hermetic axioms, where we can read a lot of quotes if we'd like. Highlighted this one. The possession of knowledge, unless accompanied by a manifestation and an expression in action, is like the hoarding of precious metals, a vain and foolish thing. Knowledge, like wealth, is intended for use. The law of use is universal, and he who violates it suffers by reason of his conflict with natural forces. I think
Very
it's a
important.
very dramatic way of phrasing something I generally agree with.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of quotes, just kind of key thoughts, I think, of like, these are my favorite parts of the book, or the books before. Um, some writers have expressed this idea most forcibly by using the illustration of the dark room. You do not have to shovel out or sweep out the darkness, but by merely opening the shutters and letting in the light, the darkness has disappeared. So I thought that was nice.
Yeah, it's in the context of transforming a negative quality into the positive one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be brave instead of fearful, it isn't the right way to destroy the fear, but to focus on becoming courageous instead.
Mm-hmm. That
Yeah,
transmutation it goes back to of that
yeah, yeah.
transforming it rather than destroying it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Ben actually read the book. Yeah. He did a great job.
Thank you.
Oh,
You
such a
get an A on this one, Ben.
you get an A. Gold star for Ben. Somebody put a gold star next to his name in the server.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right. Coming by rentals have changed in degrees of
It's a bit of going back over things that already have been mentioned.
oh, here's a good one.
So,
You simply overcome one law by counterbalancing it with another. I think that really emphasizes how it does see a lot of connection throughout the text about these different laws and things it goes through, right? And their intent overall is that they're all connected and meant to interact with each other. Um, Sorry to interrupt you.
hmm?
I don't. Did I interrupt you? I don't know.
I don't think so. No,
Okay, good.
I don't feel interrupted.
Good. Go me. um. Mostly it seems to be keying in on this idea of like going above and beyond the game that humanity is playing so that you are like a 4D chess player. Because it talks about pawns a lot, but also the sheep-like nature of humanity. So
Mm.
overall, you want to stop being humanity long enough to be that grand master, but also you're stuck in it because of necessity.
The all is mind, the universe is mental.
Yep, there we go.
Amen.
Amen. Any follow-up thoughts, my friends?
Amen.